Hello, and welcome to the One Club Denver's Fireside Chat. We are here to have a conversation with some of the best planners in the business, and this subject is the art of strategy. So thanks everyone for coming out. Before we get into it, we do want to thank a few of our sponsors. So obviously One Club Denver, Fortnight Collective, $11 Bill, Denver Ad School, and Cactus. But let's get into this. The first thing I'd love to do is just have each one of you tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe take a minute to introduce yourself, where you work now, anything you want to share about your journey along the way, and most importantly also, I'd love you to add one personal or work mantra or philosophy that you live by. So I see Danya here at the top of the screen, so I'm going to go to Danya.
And thanks, Andy. Fun to be here. Yes, I'm Danya Scott. I am here in Boulder, Colorado. I'm a founder of Fearless Unlimited. The brief story of the journey is I was head of strategy at CPB, left that to go to DC for a while, where I learned a lot beyond the conventional world of marketing and saw a real opportunity to use all these things that we do, pushing them against issues. We do still do brand work, et cetera, but we call ourselves a social impact agency. Personal work, it's all the same. I guess as I've gotten older, my sort of animating questions are just how honest can I be, how brave can I be, and how kind can I be? And it's all the same, work and life.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. How about Brian?
Hey, everybody. I'm Brian Smith. I'm happy to be here. And I run strategy at 72 and Sunny. We are a creatively led agency, work on brands like the NFL, Activision, Adobe, United Airlines. I've been here about 10 years. Andy and I used to work together way too long ago. It's good to see him again. And I used to be an account manager, a writer, a very bad intern, and probably better at strategy than any of those things. My mantra is I made this up right now, by the way, so good question, Andy. To be creative's best friend. And that does not necessarily mean always the best friend who tells them everything is awesome and be really nice to them. Sometimes it's saving them from themselves, bringing the tough love, giving them gifts, supporting them, because it can be a pretty tough and scary job. And we are here to enable amazing creativity.
Lexi? Can we hear you?
Got it. All right. My unmuting capabilities were disabled for a second there. Hi, everyone. I'm Lexi Perez. I'm happy to be here, happy to join this group and have this conversation. I am currently a global planning director at Disney, specifically within their parks, experiences, and products division. I'm the second planner. We're just starting to stand up our planning capability. My journey has been a bit of a winding one, eclectic, a little bit of agency side, freelance, brand side, consulting, direct to client. It's a bit mixed bag. And my mantra, or the model that I'm following these days, is I have two. A professional one is follow your curiosity. I feel like that has been the theme of my journey and my professional journey, and leaning into that. And then the second, from a personal standpoint, is work to live, not live to work. Enjoy life.
Great, thank you. Ed, how about you?
Hey guys, it's good to see everyone. Andy, thanks for the invite. I remember you had hair the last time we worked together, so it's been a while.
I've aged. I just put it on my beard and no longer on my hair.
Got it. Run from the top to the bottom. I'm Ed. I look after strategy on the Samsung team at Publicis, and been a planner all my life. Been at a few countries and a few places, but luckily I fell into the right gig. My mantra is something I say maybe every hour to my team, which is 2 words, is just human words, right? Like, just use human words. It's very, for me, it's pretty clear that planners are always trying to prove how smart they are, and they use jargon, but it's actually, for us as leaders, we know exactly where you are on the Dunning-Kruger curve by how much jargon you're using. So it's very important that you're able to use, like, kind of understand the concept, but say it in human words. So it's one of my mantras.
Great. Suzanne, how about you?
Oh, I'm so excited I can unmute myself. So I'm Suzanne. I also have been a strategy person almost the entire time. I did a little stint in PR. I wrote press releases for comics, don't ask. And I did marketing, which got me into strategy. And now I'm at McCann World Group. I have a dual role. I'm the president globally of the company and also the strategy person. So I've been applying my strategic skills to organizing and running a company just a little bit too in my spare time. But I love all your mantras, by the way. I'm going to wholeheartedly, first of all, agree with all of them, but also probably steal some of them because they're amazing. But mine would be something that is more of a nickname, I think, that I've started. It was started a long time ago, and people would say to me like, oh, you're such Susie Sunshine. Like you're always finding the bright side, even when it's really dark. And I just at first was a little offended by that. It's like, no, I can be hard. I can be rough. I can be tough. No, but I do. I think that as strategy people, our whole job is to find opportunity, and you can particularly find opportunities sometimes in the shadows and in the darkest moments, right? So I'll take the nickname. It's embossed on a notebook now that I carry around with me, and it applies to my life as well as work now. And thank you, Andy, for inviting me. Happy to be here. I'm not going to say anything about your hair. Nothing.
My pleasure. And last but not least, Katie.
Hi, good morning. I'm Katie Drakey. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I have kind of a windy background, a little bit like how Lexi described. Originally from Seattle, started off working in a software company, running the college internship program and bringing in new software developers into the Seattle area when we were having a hard time with recruiting in the late 90s. But what that led to was an understanding of how technology and marketing go together. And my next move after that was actually into an ad agency, an integrated ad agency that would do everything from the logo design and the PR junket for new tech companies. And all of our clients were tech companies. And I built out the web team. And from there, I kind of had the bug. And I found my way through a lot of different types of creative environments. Eventually, I graduated from the Seattle market and moved to Amsterdam and started working at Wyden on some global things, which was like going from the minor leagues to the major leagues, and was really turbulent that first year, but it's just so exciting. And then I just kept rolling. And we then moved on to Australia, and I worked at Droga 5 in Sydney, then moved back to the Northwest to take a job with Nike. Spent 7 years there. Part of that time was sent abroad to Japan. The last 2 years I've been working with my own consultancy. It's something I always wanted to do. And as a strategist, I always wondered what it would be like to do. What is it like when, can you sell strategic assignments? What kind? How do you partner with people who used to be just sitting at the desk or the next department over? How do you find them again so you can band and disband people? And so I've had a couple stints in the corporate side at Adidas and Nike, but the rest of it, 20 plus years, has been in a myriad of different agency environments. And the whole time it's been a strategy person, I guess, but it wasn't always called strategy. And it was at different stations in the journey. So I feel really thankful at this stage in my life anyway. I can thread a needle pretty well. And so I guess one of my mantras is that, especially now with the world being kind of weird and a little more unpredictable than normal, my mantra is about playing the long game and short game at the same time. And I have a sort of like addiction to the long-term view and elasticity of time and thinking about centuries and generations. But, there's quarterly business drivers that are going on and things we got to get done by next week. And I like the challenge of trying to think about the long game and the short game at the same time. And I think I've found that if you're able to do it, even if for just brief moments, you can have like these light bulb epiphanies of like what decisions you need to make on behalf of your clients. And so that's where I try to sit.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for sharing that. So we'll just get into some questions, and also just want to open it up. If anyone who is watching along wants to answer any questions, I believe in your Zoom, you can just enter in the Q&A and we'll make sure to ask along the way. But First, let's just talk about the traits, the skills, the competencies that really separate the best planners from the rest. And maybe, as such, like if you have thoughts on that, and also like if there's one thing a strategic planner should start doing, what should that be? So why don't we, Suzanne, would you like to start?
Sure. I mean, I think the traits that at least I've always sniffed out in the best strategy people, and many of you are in this session here, by the way, are human traits, right? So it's curiosity, it's somebody who's, dare I say, a little bit nosy, a little bit, somebody who's digging into culture and trying to understand things. But if you ever, the simplest way is when you go have a meal with someone, is there maybe a little bit of overhearing going on and trying to analyze what's happening at the next table? That's typically the sign of a good strategist, because they're interested and excited by the things that are happening around them and trying to figure out how to make sense of them and how to take that and bring it into their everyday. So, I think, again, we can get a little bit caught up in, is there this kind of data analysis skill set? Are the 75 flavors of strategy prescient, or something that somebody is bringing to the table? But it's really the human traits, I think, that make the best strategy people in the world, frankly.
Cool. Brian, how about you?
No, I love what you just said. And by the way, I actually hired somebody at a restaurant. That exact scenario happened with a data strategist with him. Like, I heard him talking numbers and said, I can learn something from you. I'll also get behind something Ed said earlier, which I really agree with. I look for clarity. It is clear thinking is so important in what we do, and actually so hard to achieve. It does start in human words, but also in the concision with which you express them, and the pressure testing you put on to make sure there's no ambiguity. Like, it's a big responsibility to be a strategist. I always say we are the people at the bottom of a mountain, and we're mountain chain, and we've got a whole bunch of people behind us, and we're pointing and we're saying, this is the mountain, this is the one we want you to get up, here's the route to take. And if you choose it wrong, or if you kind of point vaguely in the distance, you're sending a bunch of people off willy-nilly with not a great chance of success. They might still get there. They don't actually need us necessarily, but we can reduce the odds of them falling into a ravine.
Cool. Donna, you wanted to add something?
I love that. So this is interesting, Brian. I completely agree with that. It's so true. And I've seen them get sent off in the wrong place. There's a flip side of that. And this goes to what Suzanne was saying about human qualities. Okay, I feel like the best planners I've known are frankly a little insecure, and meaning not arrogant, not trying to tell how smart they are, which is what Ed was referring to. So while in the end, oh my goodness, yes, you want clarity, you want a concision, you want an articulation, but there's this, I think the best planners have this sense of always questioning themselves. Like, certitude is the death of a planner. I don't need some arrogant, like, I have the answer, because the fact is there's a million ways, right? And so it's that, the one who's always questioning, and it's like the one who's like, well, I don't really know if I know anything. And then they come out with this, the thing, right? So it's the always questioning, it's being comfortable with that discomfort and that sense of uncertainty that you never really want to lose, I think.
Cool. First of all, Katie asked on the Zoom, are we recording this? Yes, we are, and it will go live, but this is a really important question, so I think everyone should answer this. So Lexi, how about you?
Yeah, I think just to build on everyone else's point, there is, I think what I look for is the types of questions that a strategist or person asks. I'm able to assess and see, okay, where are they in their, as in respects to curiosity, based on the questions that they're asking. And so oftentimes when I hear, they say there's no such thing as a dumb question, I firmly believe in that. I think there's something, it takes a level of confidence and self-awareness to ask those what may be perceived as dumb questions, but they may uncover some really interesting responses and territories and just ways in that perhaps others may be afraid of asking. So it's a combination of, asking those dumb questions, but then also taking it a step further and asking some really interesting, kind of questions that others may not have considered asking.
Great. Katie, you have some thoughts as well?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's so many good stuff that's already been said, but I think what I'll add is I often felt like as the strategy person on a team, part of my role is to keep calm. There's a deadline. Creative synergy can sometimes feel like fireworks, and you can people can sometimes whiz out and go off the rails. And so you kind of have to be this center of calm that has a little bit of gravity, a little bit of gravitas, a little bit of stickiness. And so you're like, let me walk you back to this idea one more time. And I love where you're going, but let's see if we can tether it. So there's just kind of like this calm in the center of the storm kind of thing. I look for lateral and diagonal thinking. Maybe that's the questions that Lexi was kind of alluding to. Like, do they have the ability to think cattywampus? Because we are trying to help our clients zig and zag in opposition and create distinction from what else is going on. And so if you can't actually make those lateral and diagonal jumps, even with the way that you're conceiving and modeling the idea and the opportunity, we're going to get a lot of same. And sometimes that comes from lived experiences too. Like, have you lived in other countries, and have you done some strange jobs, and did you grow up in a crazy family, or like, just what are you bringing to the party? And then I think the last bit though, is I love your analogy of like charging up the mountain, or going on a journey or quest together, is the rigor and the tenacity and the resilience part. Because as we know, when you're creating, let's say something like, a new brand platform or something, upon which every other decision creatively and communication wise is going to now, it's the headwaters from which everything flows. You do have to do the rigor of imagining all those flows from the headwaters to the sea. You have to, what are the journeys going to be like? What are the twists and turns? What are the waterfalls, and where are the traps? Because you don't want to send people off on a dangerous quest. You want to send them on a quest where they have a chance of victory and adventure along the way. And if you have an impatient planner who's like, I got it, we're done, like there's so many more trapdoors to seal and windows to close. You can't have someone with too much short-termism.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. Ed, take us home on this question.
Oh yeah, in addition to the brilliant answers here, there's two things I'm looking for. One is what Lexi said, but it's not the dumb questions, but the awkward questions. Or like, if there's somebody, when the CMO is in front of the room and briefing us, and like the stakes are very high, but if that person has the impulse and the courage to ask the question that everybody's too scared to ask, that's usually a sign of a good planner, because they value knowing over their personal safety. It's usually a sign that like, F it, I gotta know, like I gotta act. And that intelligence, the complacency really is the enemy, I think, for planners. The second thing I'm looking for is meta learning, right? And not metaverse learning, we can talk about that later, but like the ability to learn anything. I think core to all our jobs is just, because we have to work on like TV dinners, cars, metaverse, credit card, like random things, and we have to make them interesting. I think we're all looking for people. Not only are they smart, but can they learn quickly and critically anything? So I call that meta learning, and it's kind of like, it's not the most natural thing, but when you come across it, it's very, very valuable.
Great. So we have some audience questions. So why don't we open up to one? So here's one, which is, did you have a mentor during the beginning days? If so, how did you make sure you made the best of it? Who wants to chime in here?
I did. I actually didn't know what planning was. I kind of backed into it. And I was hired at a traditional ad agency as like this digital person, because the last place I had worked, we had been building websites and email marketing campaigns back in early 2000s for like Nintendo and whatnot. And a traditional ad agency was like, we need to start getting into that stuff. Come in here and kind of teach us. But I was an account side person. But the head of planning, this woman named Sean Stripling, she's wonderful. She was like, you know what, I just really like the questions you're always asking, and you're very confrontational in the way that you interrogate what we're being asked to do. And will you work on some pitches with me? And I'm like, yeah, what's this planning thing? She was calling it connection planning at the time. I think that was the flavor of the day. Anyway, I just glommed onto her to a point where we would go to dinners and we would talk about things on the side. And we actually created much more of even a friendship than a working relationship. And that doesn't always happen. I get that. But because she was so open and willing to share everything that she knew, I just kept going, I just kept asking. She ended up being a bottomless font of knowledge. Not everybody's willing to answer every question all day long, but like, I just wanted to find out how far I could go. And we just, traveled time together. So I just was also very thankful that she saw something in me that I didn't realize that I was giving off or exuding. And she helped me find my true north, and basically that was the beginning of the journey I went on.
Anyone else want to answer that question? Tanya?
I'm gonna say something. I'm less interested in when I started in this business, I fell into it like Katie. I had to look up what planning was. I had no idea, but I was surrounded, through no fault of their own. I was surrounded by a lot of white men, and I was the only mom. I was definitely one of the only women. I'm just going to encourage whoever is out there listening now. I think so many of the people who are out there now really want to be and are so open to being a mentor, because I think things are changing fast. And thank God they are. And so it's just, I think so many, I'll just say this as an older woman, like the most wonderful thing I'm doing with my time now is just taking calls from young kids and talking to them, and kids in their 20s, and being there. And so I just, if you are looking for a mentor, just like put that energy out there. And I think there are a lot of people now who are seeing how important that is. It's changed a lot.
Great.
I'd like to add something also. In my experience, I didn't have any mentors. I literally I fell into this thing, didn't know what planning was, started off as a social strategist, right? Well, actually community manager, that's where I started, and worked my way into figuring out what this thing was through just reading and learning online, and literally following these mentors in my head, like the Mark Pollards, like the Julian Coles, like, so, all these people that were online kind of contributing their thinking, and really attaching myself to that. And like, oh, I love how they think. How can I learn more? Any suggestions that they made, whether it was on Twitter, any reading materials, I would attach myself to it. I would read and I would consume, and I would just, a sponge. But when we think about the word mentor, I never had the opportunity or really had anyone higher up or senior executive or senior leader to be my mentor. First, they didn't have the time. Secondarily, it was more so I looked laterally, my peers. There were other strategists, other planners in my group, or maybe even in other teams, that I was like, hey, how can we spar together? I love how you think. I love, the outputs that you have on a particular project. I'd love to shadow you, And so oftentimes it may not be the person further up, but it may be the person, alongside you that's a peer that could also be a mentor as well.
Cool. Thank you. All right, we got a few other questions, so we're going to keep going. So Stacy's saying, I think self-awareness is such an important trait in a planner that sometimes we don't really talk about it. How do you think strategy leaders can help their direct reports develop better self-awareness? Is it even possible in the workplace? Brian, how about you? What's your thought here?
I'm not sure I'm going to answer the question directly, but I really agree with some of the things that were said earlier about we should challenge our own assumptions and not assume we've got the right answer, not assume that we see the world the way our audience sees it. And I think, by the way, this is a really tough thing to navigate, because I think great strategists do need to start with hunches. We need to have intuition to follow what we do, or sharpen what we do, or we end up on these long, meandering fishing expeditions that just go nowhere. But if we go entirely with our guts, it is very colored by our personal experience and worldviews and can close us down. So, to me, the day-to-day experience of being a strategist is you have to be in open-minded exploration mode and really take in all sorts of different inputs from all sorts of different sources. But then you have to make a call about when to commit. And often it's not when you're comfortable committing. I totally agree that I'm always insecure when I'm like, this is what we're running at. It's a sharp thought. It's making a very deliberate decisions here. We're going to leave some stuff behind us. It freaks me out all the time. But if you don't commit, you end up failing worse. So I would rather make a bold play with a good amount of information and confidence behind it, but know that it might not work out, and you have to be okay with that.
Cool. Suzanne, you care to?
Yeah, I love that. I'll build a little bit. Self-awareness is an interesting thing. So there's a couple things that come to mind when I was reading that question, actually. First of all, always with any team I'm working with, it doesn't matter the role they're in. I, as a person often driving a team, always stop and say, what do you think? Like, how are you feeling about this? What do you think? And getting people to talk about their own perceptions, their own sort of, and it's not putting them on the spot. It's just, I truly want to know what they think about what it is that we are working on. And I think that does help people develop, a confidence, but also an awareness of self and what they're contributing to the greater whole. These are complicated things we are tackling with clients, and we need everybody to contribute in their own beautiful flavors and expertise, right? So you're trying to get that going and really trying to mix teams in really interesting ways. And I would say the second thing is being a continual learner is a big piece of self-awareness. There should never be, and I love what you just said, Brian, like, we all still get super nervous. I get butterfly-y and just freaked out when I'm tackling something new. We have evidence on our side. We have a way to get smart about stuff, but it's always a leap, right? So I think part of self-awareness as well is knowing what you love to do, doing more of it, but constantly learning. And as you build in that, it just helps you become who you are every day. And that's I just encourage teams to do that, and myself every day. You always want to be a little bit nervous about stuff, or else it just takes away the fun and magic of what we're doing too.
Cool. All right, next question. Strategy is often an educated guess or even an experiment. What details are the most important when trying to convince your client that your strategy will deliver value? Why don't we have Ed and Katie answer this one?
Yes.
Ed, do you want to go first?
I just want to make it clear. We don't know what we're doing either. We might have more experience than you, but the problem is not that we know and we won't tell you or don't have the time to tell you. The problem is it's not even we don't know. The problem is nobody knows, which is why the client is coming. There is no one answer, right? So it's good that you feel, cautious and self-aware. That's kind of like how you get to the interesting stuff. So as far as educated guesses and evidence, if you've gotten this kind of like a brief like this from a client, like, I want to do something that's never been done before and prove to me that it works, right? There's something wrong, right? Because those are diametrically opposed. The best we can do is play the odds and help the client play the odds and build up enough adjacent evidence, because there will be no direct evidence of it working or anything working, to help increase the confidence of whatever gamble you're asking them to commit to, right? Is all we can do. Ultimately, and that can come from anywhere. That can come from Google, that can come from research, that can come from primary research, but I'm looking for enough diversity and depth of evidence to improve the odds, not to like 100%. We're not going to litigate our way into convincing a client to do anything, right? That's usually not the way great strategies and great ideas are bought or made.
Cool. Katie?
Yeah, I love that. It's not a templatized world we live in. I mean, it's great when you can kind of utilize one to get started maybe, but everything should be a little bit bespoke and a little bit, handcrafted each time. And so I try to think about these three angles, truth, distinction, and action. Truth being like, there's a human truth in there, or there's a scientific truth in there, or even in this world that we're in right now about, is that real news or fake news? Like, truth is becoming really, really important, that we are aligned in what we are looking at and we see it the same way. and that we can articulate it in a way where a room full of people, clients and creatives and everybody else can go, yeah, that's the thing. Then there's the distinction part, which is, well, if there's 100 ways to skin a cat, which way are we going to do it? Let's choose a route. Let's choose a pace. Let's choose an angle in that it makes us unique and different from how somebody else would solve this thing, and also sends a message, because the way you solve communicates your ambition or your risk aversion or lack of risk aversion or your commitment. And then the last bit is the action bit, which kind of Ed was talking about, which is put some skin in the game, even if it's just a little bit. Can we test this? Can we pilot this? Can we do a small, seed to scale sort of situation? Often with communications, that can be, could we just get, 10 grand over here, hire a little team, make 20 vignettes, stick them in social, see which ones fly and see which ones die. And so we can get a read. I agree with you, Ed. It's often about building confidence in the decision makers. Particularly if they have the appetite to go and do things that haven't been done before. Let's not throw cold water on that or make it seem more arduous than it is. Let's make it seem really easy and fun to do, and something that we can all get really good at. But yeah, but nobody knows. Like it's a little bit about just, milepost to milepost, just keep swimming. Let's keep pushing forward. And I try to focus on the truth to the distinction, and then like the action taken. Yep. Not just the deck that sits in the hard drive.
So, the whole testing and research, I'd love to sort of drill down on that a little bit. I started my career at Ogilvy. David Ogilvy once said, like, marketers have a tendency to use research the way a drunkard uses a lamppost for support rather than illumination. I always loved that, and I use that in meetings all the time. Tell us about unique approaches to research, how best to sort of create illumination for brands. Who wants to start there? Danya, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah. I guess there is there will always be this desire to and push to be able to quantify or show the proof, et cetera. I think we have to remember that, especially when you're talking, to me anyway, quant can show you where you are, but not necessarily where you can go. And that's where the beauty of, the thread running through all these questions and all these answers is humanity, right? Like how do we retain the humanity and what we're doing and what we're learning? So qual to me is always the heart and soul of just understanding. I don't have a lot of tricks or new, like this and that. The trick is to try to keep it as human as possible, and just always get to the why. So and in more practical terms, I think there's a lot out there right now in terms of online, and you can capture a lot in terms of that. So really pick and choose. Then if you're going to put money against research, I'm really much more interested in either very early on in the process to understand these big unknowns and talk to human beings and get into their lives, or at the back end, when you actually have done something in the world to understand its real impact and then where you can go. But this middle ground of, hey, we have a concept or a value proposition, we're going to test that. Like that's just meaningless. It's not real, right? It's not real. So keeping it real is that's just how I'm always, that's what I'm looking to. If you're going to ask a client to spend money on research, I think that's where the value is for me.
Cool. Suzanne, you want to weigh in as well, or?
I'm just nodding until my head is like falling off, because it's, I'm a very older planner. I'll just say that out loud. I've been doing this a long time. And in the beginning, I had to use a dial-up computer to go on like Hoover's database to get information about company profiles, which I will say out loud, and probably no one watching this knows what that is. Or I'd go to the library. Let me just say that. And do some interesting quals. So, and now we have so many sources of truth, some of them, and so many sources of just, a never ending stream of data coming at us. It's all what we do with it. And I just couldn't agree more that our job as strategy people is to get through all of that with enlightenment. And I did have a mentor a long time ago. he was a research specialist, and he would take a tab of data this thick and he'd go, but it's really all about a triangle. It's about the relationship between this to this to this. And I'm like, oh, of course it is. That just went to this. But that's what we do. We go through a lot of different inputs and a lot of stimuli, and then we figure out exactly what the truth is behind that. And that's always based in humanity, in my humble opinion. So I would just say, try not to be overwhelmed by all this stuff, and look for those threads, because you'll find it.
And to build on that, so Bianca, who's full disclosure is Danye's daughter, has a question. And maybe we should have Danya answer this first, and then let's have Lexi as well. I'm in a social listening class at CU, and I'm curious how you view it, if any of you use it, or if or what you value it for. Who wants to go first? Lexi, you want to go first there, or we'll go back to Danya?
Sure. This is a tricky one because I started out my career as a social strategist. And so back then I was like, my response would have been, yeah, social listening, the tremendous value. Today, it's slightly different. I think there's value in it, but it can't be the only source, of information. And I think, and the reason for that is because I believe that, what people say on social media is might not be always the truth. Think about how social media is used. You kind of showcase your representative, the best version of yourself. Are you really going to share, your most inner thoughts? What people may say on social media may not align with how the action that they take in real life. And so, while there may be value to social listening and those nuggets of truths in social media, it's not the only truth. I think it's probably one dimension of the larger story. But I do think it plays a role, and maybe plays a role in perhaps sparking a hypothesis of sorts, and then kind of, infusing other methodologies of research to validate, or kind of further investigate, is this a worthy hypothesis, kind of, to further explore. But it's very much, for me, it's a starting point. It's a starting point, but it's not the end.
Great. Brian, anything to add?
I so love the watch out, Lexi, that people perform on social media. I totally agree with that. I'd say the other, when you're looking at listening about conversation about your brand and your communications, like, it can be a humbling experience, because often what we learn is people just don't care that much about us. And when they do care, they usually are on one extreme or another. They're either super fans, super passionate, who do not represent the bulk of your audience. They're a niche, and you can super serve them at the expense of the people you need to grow with. Or they hate you and you've upset them. And again, they're the squeaky wheel. People who are having fine experiences with brands often don't have anything to say publicly about it. You have to pull it out of them. And that's, again, I totally agree with Lexi that it is an indicator, but if you stake your bet on that, you have a very skewed view of your audience and where your brand stands.
Cool. Danya, you want to take us home on this one?
Those guys are great. They know more than I do. I would just say the internet is so interesting. The promise of, oh my God, now we can know everything about everyone and everything, right? There is a bit of we just have to be cognizant that it's turned into a little bit of a black hole where it swallows things, and depending on who you are, you're going to get this or you're going to get that. And we're in a very interesting place with that. So exactly what Lexi and Brian just said, like it's a tool. It's not the be all and end all.
Cool. I'm going to collapse two questions. So Connie's asking, where to go? I think it was about, would love to know the panel, if the panel has a favorite, memorable, and informative must-read book on strategy. And then there's also a question about, Lexi mentioned reading to better understand what planning was. Could maybe mention something you read that really helped you understand the position. So hopefully everyone can kind of expand on that. Ed, you want to start there, and then we'll go to Katie next?
I will try to answer the must-read book, and I would encourage you to read the book. I think it's called Naked Economics, or is it something not in the category? Because I think planning, what we do at its best, it is not a recommendation between one campaign or another, or one consumer group or another. It's a recommendation between doing a campaign at all or firing 5,000 people for a senior leader, a company leader. And a lot of those decisions are made, not I won't say corporately, but they have to do with business, not like marketing or advertising, right? Like, so I would encourage you to really get a better understanding to the best of your ability of like the naked business and what is driving shareholder value, or what the leaders are thinking is driving shareholder value. Because often the reality is like communications and advertising is somewhere in the middle, if not all the way at the bottom, right? And if you only understand like how to make a great ad and not the impact of like what that means for that CMO or CEO and their business and their decisions of trying to buy new machines or expand to other countries and all that, if you don't understand our piece within the context of their bigger problems, you're going to limit yourself in the kind of conversations and recommendations that you're going to be able to make.
Katie, any thoughts for you?
Ooh, I'd want to plus up what Ed just said. Having worked inside of 2 massive global organizations, it made me realize the position of communications and advertising really in the food chain, and how much I was shielded from that information when I was working in the ad agency, and how sometimes you had great clients that would give you an indicator of what's going on, and more often than not, you wouldn't. And you might be able to pull some of it out of them, but honestly, you're running in the blind more than you even realized, which changed the way that I would brief agencies once I was on the inside, because I was so sensitive to that experience. I ended up trying to educate my agency partners. But in terms of books, I'm a bad person to answer this question, because I wholeheartedly don't read marketing and business books. I read sci-fi almost exclusively, but I think part of the reason I really love it is it's still strategic thinking. And oftentimes it's really around solving problems. Some of them are really unique and odd, but they're often stories about like some of them that are a little more closer to home, like some of the ones from Kim Stanley Robinson or from Neil Stephenson. They're about decisions, macro decisions we can make as a human species to save ourselves, and how can we live in symbiosis with a big macro system called the environment. I just like having my brain stretched really far away from the minutia of the day-to-day of marketing, the 24-hour cycle, the multiple like hyperactive metabolism of social media cycles, and then you zoom out and you think about 10,000-year projects and people journeying through space to try to colonize another place. I just really enjoy what it does to my brain. It's still strategic in a way. And I find that oftentimes I find these moments of epiphany in these stories that I can pull into my work. I can realize I need to I need to take the strategy up to the 30,000 foot level so that people can see the bigger picture, so that we can then dive back into it. Oftentimes there's anecdotes from some of those narratives that I can bring into the work that kind of crack the idea open in a new way. So if anybody wants sci-fi books, I got them for you.
Cool. Anyone else want to answer?
I have one quick little thing. So a very good classic, John Steele, Truth, Lies, and Advertising. I mean, come on, just like still, it's, back to exactly, we still do the same things. And then the other thing, I'm just going to go super nerd. William Gibson's pattern recognition for me, speaking of sci-fi, but also just like, I don't know, there's beautiful storytelling, and I'm going to embarrass Danya. Like, she's the most amazing storyteller I've ever worked with. And that's what we do. So I would just say, like, dive into stories and understand their construct and understand the characters. That is exactly what we do as strategy people. So go read those 2. It'll give you fundamentals plus the art of storytelling all in one.
Oh,
Cool.
Can I jump into it? Sorry, I love everything you've all said. And the book I always recommend to new strategists I work with is Story by Robert McKee, who, if you've seen the movie adaptation, is the screenwriting guru / gas bag. But the book is a masterclass on story and on being insightful. And that's one of the hardest things about our job. Like, you can learn how to decode how a business works. You can learn how to structure an argument, but being insightful, like it is possible to do, but that is a fumbling. I mean, look, I'm sure there's probably a question in the comments about like, how do you get to a great insight? That's one of the hardest parts of the job. And that book helped me more than anything I've ever read.
Okay, awesome. One other thought I'd love to sort of drill down on is, how can creatives, clients, account people best partner with strategic planners? Maybe we can look at it through the lens of the agency side, but Lexi, it would be great for you to look at it through the lens of you've worked, with agencies, for agencies, but you also now it's like on the client side, like, yeah, I mean, in some ways we all hopefully pride ourselves and try to be strategic planners and help with that process, but like how best to cultivate a relationship where everyone can be involved. I know, Brian, you said like be, the creative's best friend. I mean, it's so integral to that process. So who wants to start there? Ed, would you want to answer that question? Sorry, as you're about to drink some water.
Trying to choke me. Yeah. There's the question of how to be a better partner to creatives.
Yeah, just how to foster a relationship across multiple entities, whether it's with clients, account people, creatives, strategic planning process.
I think it depends on what I think at what level, but also at the core of every great idea is like safety, I think, right? So like if I can't have an honest conversation with Brian or any of you, we're not going to get to anything interesting, or it's going to take us 3 times as long. Right? So it's actually I think one of the biggest responsibility of the leaders is to create environments of safety, because what I've realized is like when we're talking to, especially at different lower levels, when we're talking and giving feedback to others, juniors, they conflate our seniority with our feedback, right? Like, so when we say something like whatever idea you have, we just say, hey, are you sure that's going to work? They think that is like us or me, you saying that's not going to work, just as politely and business jargony as possible. But I'm trying to like be nice about it. When actually, I think most of us are actually genuinely asking, do you think that's going to work? And if the answer is yes, we feel much better about it, right? But those things can only happen if the average environment is one of complete safety. If the creative doesn't trust me, nothing else matters. Doesn't matter if my insight is good. Doesn't matter if I have a really pretty deck. Nothing matters. Like if the account person doesn't trust me, doesn't matter. And ultimately, if the clients don't trust us, doesn't matter. Right. So it's like it's really kind of sad, but at the core is like is the culture one built around safety, trust, and the ability to actually like really talk to each other and talk really frequently.
Mm-hmm. Lexi, what about you? Any thoughts here?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I mean, I think a couple of things. I think it's if you're on the agency side, right? I think often the perception is that the account folks are the ones that are client facing. They're the ones that are having the relationship with the client. I would challenge strategists on the agency side to break that. You got to have a communication, a relationship, spark something with the client, because you need to have your own understanding and relationship with that client as well. Especially if you're trying to get to that point of honesty and trust. It can't just be one person on the agency side that has that dynamic with the client. So that's one. Two, I think it's about understanding your client, understanding the environment, understanding what motivates them, understanding if you're working with whoever on the client side, what drives them? Are they creatively inclined? Are they more about the bottom line? Are like what is their flavor and what's motivating them? Because then you can lean into that. And I think oftentimes we forget, at least I have done in the past on the agency side, is to really take the moment to assess, like, what kind of client am I working with? What is motivating them? What is keeping them up at night? What are their challenges? What are they trying to get to? Because at the end of the day, an agency is there to not only help them crack the problem, but also make them look good in front of other people within the organization, So really understanding what motivates that client, and what is their vision of success, and leaning into that.
Cool. All right. So we have 10 minutes left and we have about 4 audience questions. So maybe we can do like a lightning round and at least have one person answer each one. So one question here is, a few times the speakers refer to themselves or their teammates as planners. What are the overlaps and differences between planning and strategy? Planning seems to me like figuring out how to get from point A to B, more what happens after strategy. While I think of strategy more about understanding existing conditions and exploring future opportunities. Katie, you want to answer that?
I'd be happy to. This is actually one of my bugbears. Like, who cares what it's called? Like, I think strategy is what we're doing, and you can apply it to a lot of different situations, full stop. And so you can do it at the business level, at the enterprise level. Sometimes they're called a certain kind of strategist. You can do it at the creative level. You can do it in the channel level. You can do content strategies, whatever. I just run around calling myself a strategist. And depending upon what the problem is, I apply strategy to that problem. And I try not to worry about it too much. I don't know how active any of you guys are on Twitter, but I'm on there a couple times a day. And there's any day of the week, people are losing their shit over this topic. I don't know why. I understand job titles sometimes put people into specific lanes. And I think just as somebody who's been around for a little while, I've had the great joy of having had a couple of those different job titles, which means I now have sharp knives of all different sizes. And so my tool belt's really good. And so if you're more junior in your career, it's probably worthwhile doing a tour of duty and kind of, be doing an apprenticeship in a lot of these different realms. And if you don't get the opportunity, ask for it or just take it, like just do it. But don't worry about what it's called. I'd be one of those people that will bang my fist on the table and be like, whatever, like you're the one that's trying to set the table. You're the one that's trying to draw the map. You're the one that's holding the compass, pointing north by northwest and bringing the story, the galvanizing story behind it on why this is the way to go. And that's called strategy.
Cool. Suzanne, what's the connection between big data and qualitative? What's that mix going to look like in the next 5 years?
You've given me a big one. So for me, the mix, so big data is what we were talking about before. There's a lot of different inputs. There's a lot of different things we're measuring. There's a lot of different things that are measured across the entirety of what we do, marketing and far beyond to the conversation that we're having, right? So I, again, think of both big data as well as qualitative as inputs. Qualitative allows you to go deeper. It allows you to understand individual things. And I think Danya said it earlier, the whys. You can delve into whys a lot more with qualitative than you can quantitative, unless you're analyzing said quantitative. So for me, it's really about the combination of those things. And I don't have a crystal ball to talk about the next 5 years, but what my hope is, what my dream is that we don't get too distracted by all of the different forms of whether it's big data, small data, medium data, quantitative, qualitative, anthropological data, all of it, that we still are using it to actually catalyze creativity. Because that's the most important piece, and how you mix it up and how you actually find those whys and find those patterns is really where the magic comes in.
Cool. So Alexa's question, I actually think it would be good for Danya, Brian, and Lexi, or a combination of, because you all had sort of interesting journeys along the way. Brian, you mentioned you were account, then strategy, creative, back to strategy, obviously like journalistic background for Danya. Lexi started in social media. So the question is, are there specific roles, positions to hold when working towards a strategic leadership position, or can you come at it from any angle? Who wants to start? Danya? Cool.
No, I think if you're hearing the through line here, I love everyone on this panel. I didn't know a lot of you. It sounds like we've all, Katie said it, lived experience. I never took an advertising class in my life. I still haven't. I lived a weird ass life and got here. And I think the thing that I was just asking the questions, right? So can take any number of different lines, and those are the best planners, right? So I would worry far less about job titles, and I would really dig into the big human questions. And I don't think your background matters. Yeah, I was in journalism, I was a writer, I did a bunch of stuff. I was a great waitress. But I want to say something else, because I want to suggest this. The world we're living in right now is dealing with really big questions. And Katie touched on this. I encourage everyone to really think beyond just conventional marketing, because the skills you have as a strategist are really needed. And whether it is education, gender identity, racism, politics, call it what you will, environmentalism, climate change, biodiversity, there's a lot of my truth versus your truth. And we are entering this like new dark age. And the skill that you have as a strategist is not only applicable in advertising and marketing. And I encourage everyone to really think about using your powers for good, because they are valued, they are needed. And so think about that. Just really open up your aperture about what it even means to be a leader in this business.
That's great. Lexi, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I think this kind of aligns with the mantra that I have, which is follow your curiosity. That's really what guided me in my career. Like and when I say follow curiosity, throughout my career, I've just asked myself the questions of like, what would be interesting about that? So I'll give you an example. Disney, right? I'm at Disney right now. Do I classify as a Disney person? Probably not. No, I'm not your typical Disney person. But I think one thing that interests me about the brand is its role. It's the idea of optimism and its role in today's culture, right? Today's world, right? It's very easy to be cynical. It's very easy to be negative. It's very easy. I mean, we're inundated with cynicism and negativity, with media and all these things. When I think about a brand like Disney, I'm like, wow, it seems to me like optimism is a bit of a challenger in today's world, right? And so it's not about the brand for me. It's not about the role, the title. I'm like, wow, I'm really more intrigued about this question about the role of optimism in today's world, in today's culture. And so I lean into that. I ask myself questions like that when I'm exploring opportunities and roles, and really use that as kind of like my compass. And I'm like, wow, wouldn't it be interesting to dive into that and really explore that and see what answers, what exploration, what I could do in this role in relation to that question. So I don't know. And that's what I mean by when I say follow your curiosity. That's how I've interpreted it in my career. And that's really, I haven't been jazzed by titles or positions. I think the other thing that also has helped me is the people identifying the people that I want to be close to. Right. So I'll give you another example. When I worked at Big Spaceship in New York, I never met Mark Pollard. And I know I sound like a fangirl here, but and probably I am, but I read a lot of his thinking, and I said, man, if I could just be in the same space with him and just learn through osmosis, wouldn't that be great? Next thing you know, I find myself at a job at Big Spaceship. It wasn't because of Big Spaceship. It wasn't because of the clients. It wasn't because of whatever awards they won. It was because of the person that was there. And I'm like, I just want to learn from that person. I just want to be in the same room with them. So that's really how I look at and how I navigate my career.
Great. All right, last question, and then we'll wrap. Brian, I'm going to you. As we work to keep our work human focused, how do you think about and or acknowledge unconscious biases in your work?
It starts with us, is the honest answer. We are the first creative department, and I think we do have a responsibility to put work in the world that makes the world we want to see. And there are so many decisions along the way that if a strategist does not do a great job of identifying both the big main audience and all of the other subcultures and sub-audiences and reflect their full humanity and give creative people really insightful, non-patronizing or cliched insight, like they're going to end up in a place that could be really not just full of bias, but I would say like actively take us backwards. So I do think it is both a responsibility and a joy for us, because we get to be that much more curious about people who may not have the same life experiences, backgrounds that we were born with. And that is like, we get to be students of the human condition every day and bring that into our creative work, not in a lectury way. No one right now, particularly big chunks of America, want to be lectured on identity politics. But if we can do it right and just tell great stories that reflect the full span of human experience, I think we're doing our job right, no matter what brand it's for.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I mean, this was an amazing panel. What a great way to start almost the weekend. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating, the panelists for participating, the audience for asking all those great questions. And big thanks, obviously for the One Club, for Creativity Denver, sponsors Fortnight Collective, $11 Bill, Denver Ad School, and Cactus. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend and see you later.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.